Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction. Uh, I think I'll share my screen and then begin, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sir. Please.
So, just a minute.
It's visible.
So, thank you for this opportunity to speak about the specialty. This is something new, and as this opportunity had come, I was actually thinking how I can connect between you engineers and us medical professionals. It is very difficult because I think there are no much interactions between these two professional branches. So I was wondering for the last 1 or 2 weeks how to get that connection when I present, because or else it will be a really difficult task to hear to me for the next 30 or 45 minutes. And what I feel is that our connection becomes better when we know each other better. So I did my homework. I went back and I just went through Google and the site of Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering, and I went through the history. So what I understood is that this institution is actually formed in 1963, and it was formed by the merging of Institute of Radio Engineers and American Institute of Electrical Engineers. And this American Institute of Electrical Engineers, that institute is there from 1880s itself. So it's a an institution with rich heritage, and the mission of this institution is basically to for technological advancements for betterment of humanity. So there, actually, in the betterment of humanity, we converge. Though our ways are different, we converge there, and there are many other junctures where we actually share common ideas and avenues. So I hope that you are very much aware of the medical profession. Main things that or main treatments, therapies that we do is basically to avoid death or to increase the life expectancy, including emergency medicine, critical care, etc. And there is a second avenue where we actually work, and that is basically rehabilitation, or adding life to years. So we have two ways of treating the patient. One is adding years to life, and then adding life to years. Whatever years you are living, you will have to live it with independence without actually having any difficulty. You will have to move yourself. You will have to do your daily activities yourself. So that's all about physical medicine and rehabilitation. And the history begins when, after the Second World War, there were a lot of soldiers who had disabilities, including amputations, paraplegia, spine fractures, and so on. So they were soldiers, and they wanted to contribute to the society even after their ailments or disabilities. So they didn't have doctors to look after them at that juncture. And then Dr. Howard Rusk, who is shown in this image, he came forward and pioneered this branch of rehabilitation medicine. And that's how this department began. Some background noises there. So that was the beginning. And now, regarding what exactly we do in physical medicine and rehabilitation, it's basically a teamwork. We have doctors trained in physical medicine and rehabilitation, and what we do is we look after the medication part. So broadly, the patients who come to us can be divided into 4 groups. The first group will be having chronic pain. It may be knee pain, shoulder pain, back pain, and they'll be having this pain for many months or years together. So there are many ultrasound guided interventions which can be actually done for the patient, including osteoarthritis, which can actually reduce down the pain and disability so that they can do their activities, they can be mobile, they can use their shoulder or back, and they won't be having any difficulty. So this is one of the group of patients. And then we have neuro rehabilitation. So she was talking about neuro rehabilitation. It's basically patients with stroke, spinal cord injury, brain injury, etc. They will have issues after stroke and all, because they won't be, there is some background noise, I think. Okay. So they will be having some issues, and they won't be getting back to the normal 100%. So we'll have to help them with elevation of pain and improving the muscle power. And in these cases, along with medicines, we will be requiring a team of physiotherapists occupational therapist, speech therapist, valve therapist. So we have a team of this paramedical personnel along with us, including a psychologist, and we work together after making a functional assessment. So first, as doctors, we make a functional assessment and then assess what exactly is the deficit in this patient and then move accordingly. So that's how we usually work. And then the third group is the pediatric group, like children. So they will have different issues like cerebral palsy and all. So we will have to again assess them and see whether certain things can be modified or made better, because each child will have a certain potential. So we'll have to find out what actual potential is there and try to take the child to that level. And then we have a fourth group, amputee rehabilitation, because amputation or cutting off the leg or the hands, it's not as simple as we think. So there are a lot of complications after that. We have prosthesis actually to improve the function. We have prosthesis or artificial limbs, but along with that, there will be so many problems with the stump or the cut part. So we will have to assess and manage it accordingly. So these are the four main groups of patients who come to us. And we also learn about wheelchair modifications. So that is basically physical medicine and rehabilitation. And with this basic concept, I think we can go forward. And to make it very simple, one of the best PMR departments in India is there in CMC Vellore. I think it will be far more better understood if I say about CMC Vellore, because one of our finest actors, Mr. Jagari Srikumar, when he had that accident, he was rushed to CMC Vellore and he was actually looked after from the day one by physical medicine and rehabilitation department. From there, he had a brain injury. So from consciousness part, he was unconscious. So from that part, we had to give him medications and then all the exercises. And now he's back in Trivandrum and he's maybe 40 to 50% of normal. But what we got back is just because of this group work or teamwork that happened there in CMC Vellore. So in Kerala, though we are our literacy is really good, but this department has not developed by leaps and bounds as in CMC Vellore. So it's developing over the last 5 or 6 years. We have considerably good departments in Trivandrum, Cochin, and then now we have begun in Calicut. So we actually want to give the same treatment options that's available there in good rehab institutes around the world in our state. So that's our vision. So the road, we have just begun our journey. And the most important thing in our journey is regarding information. Many people do not know about this specialty and what we can do for these patients. And there are many engineering collaborations that is coming up in this specialty. And that's why I thought I'll speak about the specialty and what we actually can get as a help from you and what we can provide to the engineering section, vice versa. So many times patients don't know that there is a small hurdle which is actually preventing them from improving their function, and they think that it's a big wall and they get stuck up and they lie on their beds for months and years together and become dependent on others. So this presentation basically will be covering two main areas. One is regarding the bond between doctors and engineers. So where are the areas that we can actually bond together and actually find common avenues. And the second part is actually the do's and don'ts regarding our specialty. Maybe you will have patients around you having all these problems. So what are the basic things that you can advise them or make sure that it's not being done so that you can prevent complications and help them be better as a common person. So to begin, I just went through the website, and then IEEE Brain Initiative is there on the website, as you'll be very much aware of that than me. So in this website, they have talked about neuroprosthesis. Neuroprosthesis basically, we have electrodes placed in the brain, and they read the brain neuronal activity, and then they decipher it and decode it, and then use it with the help of peripheral stimulation to move the muscles. So that is neuroprosthesis. And in September 2020, they have a first plug and play brain prosthesis, which is actually far more similar than which was there before. So it's basically electronic neural bypass. You are getting the signals from the brain and moving the muscles. You are not using the nerves in between them. Because in patients with stroke and other disorders, they won't be able to move the muscles. And it's very difficult for some patients to move even in the whole lifetime. And we can give this prosthesis if it develops to these patients so that they can do their activities on their own. So this is the image of a neuroprosthesis which was there before. So there are electrodes over the brain, and then these are the electrical stimulation. This is the electrical stimulation being done to move the hand, to improve and do the activities of daily living. So this is an image showing how the patient takes a bottle and then how the patient holds a spoon, etc. The second part is regarding virtual reality. Again, you'll be very much aware of this part, Danas. And it's basically a simulation technology actually put forward by Jay Lamier in 1986. And we use this virtual reality system very frequently in our department for mainly for patients with stroke. It involves actually real-time simulation and interactions. So what happens is without virtual reality, our patients do exercises and therapies, and within 5 or 10 minutes, the patients get exhausted. And even the therapist also gets exhausted. So when we give this gaming system, the patient gets real-time feedback and they know where exactly they go wrong, and they improve with the help of sensors. So that's about virtual reality. And in virtual reality, there are different types of learning, like supervised learning, reinforcement learning. These two types are there, and unsupervised learning is without any supervision. I think, again, this part will be very much familiar to you because this is a part of machine learning, which is a subset of AI, artificial intelligence. So supervised learning is basically we feed everything to the patient. We give a prompt to adjust the movement, and this is usually help with the cerebellar part of our brain. Cerebellum is actually a part of the brain over the posterior aspect or the back of the brain. And then there is reinforcement learning, which is basically a trial and error method. They try to do something and they go wrong, they do again and they become better. So another area, basal ganglia, is helpful for reinforcement learning. Again, this is a type of machine learning too, same one. And there was a study, Everest study, which was done in 2010, and it has found that virtual reality is really helpful in improving the muscle power, because basically what happens is if you give more input, you get more output. That is the basic dictum. And when you do therapy for 5 minutes, and then when you do the gaming for 1 hour, there is a difference for the patient. The recovery becomes better, and the patient may have to come for fewer sessions, and it really helps the patient and the medical system also. And again, coming to the next part where we can actually collaborate together is regarding environmental control units. Again, Internet of Things has become very popular right now, including Alexa. Now, patients with spinal cord injury who are having difficulty with mobility, many times these are really helpful, and we usually ask them to use them in appropriate situations. And power wheelchairs are very commonly being used now. Actually, around 6 months to 1 year back, government had an initiative of giving power wheelchair free of cost to spinal cord injury patients, and thousands of individuals had actually availed. And it's actually very expensive. That's a problem because the expense comes from 2 lakh to 8 lakh. So not all patients can afford this. So here, if we can actually develop a cheaper model from our part in the state, it would be helpful to many of our patients, because the government may not be supporting every time. That's a problem. And then regarding tilt in space, again, that's a wonder of engineering, because it helps in elevating the incidence of pressure injuries or bed sores. So when a patient sits for more than 20 minutes, he's liable to develop a sore. And when we have tilt in space, we actually reduce the amount of bed sores that we see. Even the propulsion techniques, a part of engineering, there are different propulsion techniques. So we have to specifically teach the patient what exactly is the best way to propel their wheelchair. Again, engineering comes in, and the semicircular pattern is said to be the most energy efficient pattern, and it's being taught to the patients. But the commonly seen pattern is single loop over, where the arm goes through the upper part. We will have to reteach them usually, because this is a bit easier for the patient, but it's more energy consuming. Coming to splints, again, liver, fulcrum, everything is important for splints. We give it to conditions like a neuropathy, then rheumatoid arthritis, and then conditions including trigger finger, which are very common. And regarding cervical collars, I would like to stress upon this slide because I have seen many patients with neck pain using cervical collars for maybe months together. I would like to bring to your notice that you should not wear cervical collar for more than 5 days in any reason, except for spinal cord injury. If you have a fracture there, it's okay. Or else for disc issue or neuropathic issues, you don't use cervical collar for more than 5 days. It will actually reduce down your muscle power and it will do more harm in the long run. So that's very important. And secondly, most of the cervical collars that you get in the market, they are manufactured according to the size of the Caucasians or the Europeans, not according to our neck size. Our neck size is usually smaller. And when our patients put this neck collar, they'll be just looking up because there will be neck extension. And this will actually reduce down the canal size. There is a cervical canal and the size will reduce, and again, the symptoms will increase. So if you don't put it properly, it will again cause more harm. So if you have any difficulty in putting collar, if you don't get the smallest collar available, if it's still not fitting you, you can actually move the anterior or the front part to the back and the back part to the front so that you can stay comfortably. So this is something you can actually use of because neck pain is really common nowadays. And work-related musculoskeletal disorders, ergonomics, again, a very common topic. Maybe you might have been exposed to this part. And pain and exhaustion are health hazards, which can lead to wasted productivity and reduced quality, as we know. So what is the solution? The solution is ergonomics, proper application of ergonomics in jobs, work environments, and designing machines. So we have standardization, including ISO standardization for that. And the proper posture, it's not rocket science, basic science. If you can avoid your laptop, better to avoid. Or else with a laptop, use a keyboard. It's because your monitor should be at a degree of at an angle of 15 degree from your eye level, the center of the monitor, and your hand should be at the level of the elbow. So when you use a laptop, it's very difficult to maintain both of these things, or else you can buy an extra keyboard and keep it at that level. And this is the most important part when you have to work for 16 to 17 hours a day. Usually we do it now, right now, because many of us are working from home. And regarding pointing device, it should be at the same level of the keyboard. That's it. And these work habits are again important because we have patients who are coming up with the back pain after working for long hours. So you'll have to take rest breaks for every 30 minutes. Breaks doesn't mean that you will have to, they don't mean that you'll have to walk for again 10 or 15 minutes. You just have to get up, just roam around for maybe 5 or 6 seconds and come back and sit. But take that rest. You should be very much aware, and you can keep an alarm and take that small rest after 30 minutes, and you can practice good body biomechanics. You can have a good chair, and stretching is always helpful. And eye breaks are also again important, and they say that every 15 minutes you'll have to take an eye break, which may be difficult, but at least if you take a break after 30 minutes, if you stand up and walk, you are automatically getting an eye break. Now coming over to the second part, where you can see patients around you, and maybe you can help them with simple things like in cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy is being common right now because cesarean deliveries are more, and most of the babies survive. We have all the sophisticated equipments to make them survive, but they may have problems after that during their growth. So in these children, we get a common question whether they will walk or not. A basic dictum is that if the patient or the child sits before 2 years, then the child will walk. Or maybe we can say if the patient or the child sits before 4 years, they will walk. 2 to 4 years is a bit of arbitrary area. So that is the basic thing that I would like to share with you. And then regarding pain rehab, again, it's actually developing, and for the last 5 or 6 years, it's developing like anything. We have a lot of interventions, including platelet-rich plasma. You might have heard about it, including for hair regeneration. We use that. In osteoarthritis knee, we usually give injections, and they are very effective, and the knee replacements have gone down drastically after the advent of platelet-rich plasma. And then we have medications, postural corrections, and reconditioning. I'll talk to you. And this is one of the most important slides. That's what I feel, because we have seen many computer professionals who has been coming to us with back pain. They'll be in their early 30s. They'll be sitting for long hours and they'll be having a pain over the lower back. It will be like a band, and the pain will be more in the morning time. So when we assess them, there won't be any other problem. There won't be any radiation of pain to the legs. It's basically aerobic deconditioning syndrome. Because just like we breathe, our muscles also have to breathe. And they will have to use oxygen for actually metabolizing they'll have to use the oxygen for metabolizing the products there. And what happens is, when you sit for long hours, they would be stopped using oxygen and using other metabolic pathways. And then the waste products are actually accumulating inside that area, and it causes the pain. The simple treatment for aerobic deconditioning is practice half an hour of walking every day. Or if you can, swim. So these are the aerobic activities that can be done. And if you practice half an hour of walking, within 2 weeks, this pain will go down. You don't need anything else. If it is severe pain, we'll have to use medicines to reduce down the inflammation pain. And then coming to knee pain, not all knee pains are osteoarthritis or degenerative. There are a lot of causes. And as I said before, platelet-rich plasma is actually revolutionizing the management of knee pain. We have a lot of patients who have good results with platelet-rich plasma. And we use ultrasound guided interventions so that we can rightly get into the joint and do the intervention. Coming to spinal cord injury patients, again, there is a large subset of patients. You may see or come across them. And for them, even in non-spinal cord injury patients, we always have a risk of developing bed sore over the heel area. So this is one of the most important areas of our body where bed sores develop. And the easiest way to avoid this, just not being practiced even in many hospitals, is just place a pillow over the calf area so that the heel will be free. Rather than keeping gloves filled with water over the heel area, just to keep a pillow over the calf area and the heel will be free. And you'll have to turn the patient every 2 hours. The patient can't do so, especially in spinal cord injury patient. And when you don't turn to 90 degrees, better turn to 30 to 40 degrees. I'm just speaking about this because you may see patients around you, and maybe they may not be so much aware of these things, because this specialty as such has not developed here. It's just developing. And they may not have got to know these things, basic things. And you will have to keep the sheets wrinkle free. That's very important. So in spinal cord injury patients, when they lie down for long hours, even wrinkles can cause bed sores. And then regarding stroke, post-stroke, usually the function improves in 80 to 90% of the people, and usually it improves in 3 months, but certain people will have disabilities after that. And they will have disorders of consciousness. Again, consciousness is a very broad term. There are a lot of levels of consciousness. And at each levels of consciousness, there are different medicines that we can use. Once the patient opens the eyes, the medicine changes. And when he or she becomes agitated, the medicine changes. So there are a lot of medicines which has come to the fore in the last 10 or 20 years. And regarding swallow therapy, again, many of even doctors are not that much aware. Swallow therapy is actually being taught along with speech therapy in many of the colleges, but not all. So swallow therapy is again very useful for removing the Ryle's tube, or the tube which we put into the nose. So if you want to remove it fast and safely, it's better to go for a good swallow therapy and then do it. And this is a tilt table that we use in our department, electronic tilt table. Again, a gift from the engineering field. It's very useful to improve the consciousness, to reduce down the episodes of hypotension and all. There are so many uses, including cardiac patients are the beneficiaries of this tilt table. And then mass unweighing harnesses are being used for patients in the earlier periods of rehab. Physiotherapists use them. And then treadmill. Again, for a treadmill, if we can add on virtual reality to treadmill, it would have been great, because I had actually searched for such a treadmill, but I learned that it's very expensive, around 60 or 70 lakhs. So our hospitals won't be ready to invest such a big amount for a treadmill. Again, if someone from our part can do some work on that, it would be great, because every hospital, if it's not that expensive, hospitals will be ready to have that. It's basically a treadmill and having a sensor over the foot area, so that the patient know when the patient walks, there will be a feedback from the monitor. He can walk through the forest, he can walk through any part of the world, in maybe in Germany or France, anywhere. So we'll get a feedback, and then according to that, he can adjust his walking. So that will be great, because people will be adhering to the therapies more. And then the virtual reality we have already discussed, and we have rehab robotics, which is not there right now in our hospital, but it's there in many of the hospitals in the metro cities. And I think it's coming up in Cochin also. And again, botulinum toxin injection is again a big boon to many of our stroke patients, because we see a lot of patients with this sort of a difficulty, and more than functional problem, it will be a cosmetic problem for them. This will be actually preventing them from attending marriages and other programs. So when we give botulinum toxin injection to specific muscles, the tightness reduces down, and they can walk normally as if they are normal. So I think that's it from my part regarding our specialty. It's basically regarding disability or different disability, and this is the Rights to PWD Act of 2016. It's a landmark for disabled people. So when we say disabled people, we'll think that it's someone else and it won't happen to us, but just a fall may actually make us disabled. So it's just a matter of time. We don't know when we become disabled. So we should be always ready and make sure that the society is ready to accept even if we are getting disabled. And we should always dream of an accessible country. Right now, if you get disabled, and if I'm getting disabled, and if I'm in a wheelchair, it will be hell for me in our country, but not so in many other countries, because I cannot go to a beach. It's not that easy, but the new beach is better. But still, in many parts of this country, you cannot go to the beach. You cannot go to the shopping mall. You cannot go for shopping in the market. So it's not accessible. It's very difficult for a person in a wheelchair to even go to a government organization, government building. There would be stairs, and there won't be any ramps, or there won't be any lift. So we have to change a lot from the route, and we have to actually consider them who are in wheelchair. And this act has actually envisioned that by 2021, all governmental institutions should be accessible. But now it's already 2020, and I don't see any serious activities going on in that manner. And then for them, we have loans available from the National Handicap Financial Development Corporation. They're giving it at a very subsidized rate. And many of my patients are actually recipients of that loans, and they're doing well with their businesses. And they have a separate day for persons with disabilities on the 3rd of December. And I think this slide is again important. How a society treats its disabled is the true measure of a civilization. So that's it. This is our team. It's basically doctors, paramedical professionals, and everyone working together along with the patient. So our team leader is basically the patient. The patient will decide what exactly to do. We'll give them the options, because it's not 100% all the time. The patient who may be coming to us will be at 10% of his potential. We'll have to make it to 70 or 80% and then send him back. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Dear participants, if you are having any query, it's your time.
Hope
So
I
that
have
was a
not bored you.
wonderful session. Okay, please, sir.
Hope I have not bored you, because
not at all. It was an interesting topic, and as well as concerned with this particular I was discussing about somebody that if we cannot cure the things on that particular time, that is, if somebody is having some problems, and if it is not cured, then only it will be reaching into this rehabilitation. Is it right, sir?
Actually, rehabilitation begins from day one. If a patient has stroke, if you begin the rehab from day one, like soon after the stroke, if you begin the movements and all, the outcome is always better. Because as the time passes by, the chance of the brain to adjust to the new surroundings and be bit better comes down.
Okay.
So early rehab is very important. And that's what they are actually focusing on in CMC Vellore and good rehabs. In US and Canada, this is one of the most sought after specialty. But in India, it's coming up slowly. Because in India, the problem is that people don't have money to have their food. And they cannot think about rehab. If someone is having stroke or spinal cord injury, just dump there. And then the other people will go on. So I think at least in Kerala, the scenario is changing. And if the patient becomes better, then others will also be independent. They can go back to work. So that's the concept of rehab, making everyone independent.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Dear participants, do you have any queries? Either you can unmute yourself or you can drop into this chat box.
Hey, doctor, I have one question. Like you said, if a person who becomes disabled in our country, it's probably difficult for him to carry out his day-to-day tasks, like going to office or traveling. So just like you mentioned about government considering buildings to be accessible for disabled or physically challenged people. Are there any plans for the government to consider transportation also becoming, friendly for physically challenged people? Because I see that, outside India, many of the buses and trains and all these things are also accessible by physically challenged people. But I don't think in our country such an initiative is planned or anything.
Yeah, that's the sad part in India. I don't know how much time it will take to reach to that level, because we have other priorities too. And the next question is whether it's a priority or not. Right now, we don't keep it as a priority. And we think, okay, we don't have to do anything about that. That mindset should change. The basic attitude should change. That's the problem.
True.
The government has plans, including transport, they will have to improve. And they have kept directives in this RPWD Act of 2016, but no one is bothered about it. That's the problem.
Correct. Because there are facilities like buses have like this automated ramps where people in wheelchair can get in. There are many facilities that are there all around the world, but here it's difficult, right?
Yeah, even in Government Medical College Calicut, there was an issue. We had a professor who was actually disabled. He had polio and disabled, so he needed a lift to go up and take a class. So for that lift to get sanctioned, it got about I think maybe 6 or 7 years from the government part in the medical college. So that's the situation in India. That's the problem.
Okay. Sure. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. There is a question from one participant, Janardhanan. He's asking, is physical medicine useful for RA patients?
Rheumatoid arthritis, right?
Might be.
Yeah, rheumatoid arthritis is basically inflammation of the joints, and it's a multi-system disorder, not simply of the joints. So if there are issues with the joints, we can really look into, and there are basic cornerstone of rheumatoid arthritis management is medications. There are different medications for that, and rheumatologists will be trained in rheumatoid arthritis management. Then physical medicine and rehabilitation, we are also trained in that. And then even orthopedicians are trained in that. And then we have these exercises and physical modalities, including heat, which can be used. So it's a teamwork, and we do it as a team. So yeah, rheumatoid arthritis, we have a very important work to be done in rheumatoid arthritis. And it's very effective if you work as a team.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hello.
Sir, I'm Dr. Nasreen. Actually, my daughter is a stroke patient. She had infantile stroke, sir, intrauterine.
Okay, right.
So actually, we've been doing treatment ever since she's been diagnosed. So like as of now, she's fine. She walks. She's almost independent. There's nothing I need to do for her. Main problem now is she's a little mentally, maybe a little behind the normal.
Okay.
So that's all now I feel now. But as if, as you might be knowing that, like how much can we physically? Her hand is a little. She's not very strong on her hands. The affected hand, right hand.
Yeah. How
so,
old
so
is she?
how she's now 9. She's 9.
Okay.
Okay. So, her foot is almost fine. Hand is slightly, I feel, she's not able to hold as she wants to. Even if she tries, she's not able to hold as, the normal hand. So, like, how much can intervening help? We do therapy 4 to 5 times a week. The therapist comes here and do therapy. So, I wanted to know, like, how much can we come back to normal?
Okay. Yeah, basically, this difficulty in using the hands may be due to 2 reasons. One may be due to pain, and second may be due to weakness. So, if there is any pain, if she has any pain, we should manage that pain. If she has any pain when we actually press her hands, then we should manage that pain. There are ways to manage the pain, including interventions and medicines. And then her hand functions will improve. And the second part is her weakness. If she has weakness, again, this virtual reality system, and there are different ways. So we will have to concentrate on certain things, the basic things that she has to do. Maybe she will have to do a grasp, maybe a cylindrical grasp, or maybe a spherical grasp. So we'll have to prioritize ourselves. What is our main aim, and then do activities according to that and increase the repetitions, and then it will be easier for us. That will be how we manage this patient.
So, like, how much hope do we have? Like, how far can we come? Like, can we come to like 80% function, or
it's basically
possible?
It's never late. It's never late.
Okay.
You can actually. That's why I told, like, we'll have to see the patient and make a functional assessment. And there may be certain areas where we can intervene. It depends on the area where we can intervene. We had seen patients with back pain for 8 and 9 years. And that patient had a problem with the muscle. There was muscle guarding. We injected it and the pain went away and she was all right. She was having this pain for the last 8 years. So it's basically diagnosis and then intervention according to that. Interventions are always easy. Diagnosis.
Right.
That exactly is the problem. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other queries? If you want to ask directly to the resource person, you can unmute yourself and please ask. Hope there is no queries from the participant side. So that was a wonderful session, sir. All of the participants must have enjoyed it, and they might have given a bunch of information regarding how to overcome these difficulties, those who are having these problems in their real life. So that was a wonderful session, sir. We all are very, thank you so much for being with us today, this evening, and giving this an awareness to all the participants for this particular domain. And there is an information to all the participants. There is a link we have provided here. Please fill the feedback link and submit it for enabling for you to get the certificates. This is the link already have been posted here in the chat box. Thank you, sir. Sabik, sir, over to you. I request resource person Dr. Naufal Ali, sir, can you please provide us your contact email either mobile number or email information so that we can be in touch with you.
My email ID is Dr. Naufal Ali, DrNoufalali.
I'm writing here NAUSHAD.
No, Dr. Naufal Ali, DrNoufal.
Okay.
FAL, NOU, O for owl.
Okay.
Naufal Ali @gmail.com. If you have any queries, you can ask. Yeah,
Okay.
if it can be answered, I'll be answering from my side, whatever possible.
Okay, sir.
It's Doctor, yeah, NOUFA, right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, thank you, doctor. Thank you. It was a nice session. You have connected your profession with IEEE. That is really very good. You have shown the work actually being taken part in IEEE session.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for correlating that. And actually now we have seen that doctors alone cannot work, as similarly engineers cannot work alone. So both have to correlate or collaborate together for successful development of the society. So hope we'll have, because we have a lot of young engineers who are getting graduated. So I believe that in future these engineers will have like biomedical engineers, they are getting graduated, so they will have a good opportunity to work along with doctors.
Yeah, we have a lot of engineers working with us, biomedical.
Yeah. Okay, fine. That's what. So
together.
I think this webinar, most of the students are from biomedical engineering streams.
Oh, right.
So they have a lot of hopes, like how they want to be mingling with the doctors.
Actually, there are a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of needs. We have a lot of needs from our patients. We can pass over to the engineering part and we can help the patients.
Right.
From our part.
Okay. Thank you, doctor. So we'll have again once again
Thank you so
later
much, sir.
later section. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.